we are going to do a really quick 10-minute or less run through of Reconstruction. I have already tried this twice and it has gone way over each time. So I'm going to make it 10 minutes or less. Here we go. All right, so Reconstruction, if you remember, was a time period after the Civil War in America where we were trying to rebuild the country, especially in the South, and heal all of the problems that the North and South had with one another. And we know that was super, super tough. People did not like each other. Here's the pictures we looked at the beginning of the unit showing the two different areas that were affected. Remember, Sherman's March to the Sea, all the different battles happening in the South. The South was in ruins, and a lot of rebuilding will need to take place. The goals of Reconstruction, we started with Abraham Lincoln. As President of the U.S., he wanted to, first off, preserve the Union. He wanted to make sure there were as few hard feelings as possible. He wanted people happy with each other. And after a war, it's really tough to do that. So he did his best to try to start that, but unfortunately we know he is about to get assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. He also wanted, during the war, to end it as quickly as possible. The quicker you end the war, the less damage there is, the easier it is to get people back together, and the less people die. So it's always good to end the war quickly. Unfortunately, that didn't happen very well either. All right, his three-part plan, 10% of the voters in the southern states had to pledge allegiance to the U.S. in order to pass Reconstruction. They all would also need to form a new government so that all the old government people were out that helped start the war. And the states must ratify the 13th Amendment, which, if you remember, abolished slavery. It was a pretty easy plan, and he was planning on it. He thought that was a way that could get everyone back together again. Unfortunately, we know he was assassinated a few days after the war was over, so he would never get to see Reconstruction even really start. It would take longer because of his death, and it would soon be controlled by Congress. All right, we have Andrew Johnson. He wanted to be similar to Lincoln, but he also wanted to humiliate the rich people in the South. And the problem with him being so easy, even easier than Lincoln ever wanted to be, was it would lead to African Americans being treated badly. He would not be watching those Southerners, and they would treat the African Americans badly, unfortunately. All right, the Southerners' aims, they wanted to stop their way of life from changing. They wanted to keep their plantations. They wanted to keep slavery, but they knew that was about to go out the window. They wanted to take away African Americans' rights. Since the African Americans were about to be free, they said, hey, we're going to take away your rights. We're going to make you feel like you're not free. And finally, they wanted to elect Confederates to Congress and different government positions, so that way they could get these laws passed that would hurt African Americans and get them back to normal in the South. Wrong way. Black codes were one way of making rules that would help the African Americans not feel free, take away some of their basic rights such as owning property, owning a gun, getting certain jobs, and voting. The Ku Klux Klan group of people with crazy hats that would go around terrorizing the African Americans using violence and threats to make sure they didn't feel free. Congress had goals too. They wanted to be tough on the South. They had the radical Republican plan. They wanted to make sure that slaves were truly free. They also wanted to make sure no Confederates could be elected, because Confederates would make it just like it was before the war, and they didn't want that. They wanted slaves to be free now that they were not under slavery anymore. They wanted African Americans to have the rights they deserve. They were going to create the Freedmen's Bureau, which we'll get to in just a minute, and they also wanted to pass the 14th Amendment, which, if you remember, is going to give equal rights to African Americans all across the board. To be tougher, they were going to send the military down to babysit the South. And they were also going to have the 13th and 14th Amendments ratified. Remember, Lincoln said 13th Amendment had to be ratified. They said, nope, those southern states have to ratify the 13th and 14th Amendment, just because we want to be tough on them. Here's those military districts. Former slaves, African Americans at this time, their goals were to reunite families and create strong communities, form their own churches and other institutions, and claim equal citizenship. They just wanted to be able to live free after all those years in slavery. All right, how did life change for African Americans during Reconstruction? All right, 13th Amendment was passed. Remember that abolished slavery. 14th Amendment gave equal citizenship to African Americans. And actually, let me go back to that one for a second. Remember that the most important part here is it did give them citizenship, but they got equal protection under the law. African Americans had equal protection under the law. All right, there's a picture of African Americans lined up to vote, and you'll notice they're all men because the 15th Amendment only gave all male citizens the right to vote. Women, you'll get your time in just a few years, but it'll take a little while. Freedmen's Bureau. All right, Freedmen's Bureau was set up by the government to create schools and hospitals, help people find jobs, and provide food, shelter, and legal assistance to those in need. Now, cool thing was this was African Americans and poor whites. And even some of the richer Southerners, they could still go to that hospital. They could still send their kids to some of those schools. So this was really helping everybody. It was really a good effort to try to help those in the South. All right, how did Reconstruction affect different people economically, with money, and socially in their relationships with people? Jim Crow laws were created in the South, which did hurt things. Once the Southerners realized that black codes had to be kicked out because they took away too many rights, they said, well, if we can't take away too many rights, then we are going to separate them from us. So these Jim Crow laws were all about segregation or separation. So separating whites from blacks. And 100 years later, you'd have Martin Luther King still fighting segregation in the South. Not that the North didn't have any as well, but it was much more in the South, and in the South it was by law. So there's still going to be a lot of problems with segregation in the South. Compromise of 1877 basically ended Reconstruction. It led to the removal of all federal troops from the South, so the babysitters are headed out. Democrats won control of the southern state governments, and when that's not what Congress wanted. But again, those babysitters leave, then the Democrats or some of those former Confederates could then get into the government and try to make laws that the North would not like. And finally, marked the end of Reconstruction. African Americans could not buy land because they didn't have any money when they left. So that was one issue they had after or during Reconstruction. African Americans attended school and church. That was great. They voted and were able to hold elected office. They could actually there were some African Americans voted in to the government, which is awesome. Later on, many were going to be denied jobs in new factories because of racism. And a lot of them, like the poor whites, were going to be stuck in sharecropping. And if you remember from our activity in class what sharecropping was, and it was going to be a big issue. They're going to get in debt for a long time because of that. All right, the Southern elite, the Southern rich, they were in love with sharecropping. Remember, they lost their workers when slavery was over. And so sharecropping came around, and they were able to get workers back on their farm and keep them there for a long time because a lot of them ended up in too much debt to get off the land. They couldn't pay their way out. They gained control over the sharecroppers, but they did not have a lot of political power until after Reconstruction. Because remember, the Northerners were down there with their military troops, and they were not giving the Southerners very much power. So Reconstruction ended, and they got that power back. Poor whites. Many of them supported the Union because the Union was trying to help. And these people are called scalawags, which is a not nice way of telling them, we don't like you. So other Southerners would call these ones scalawags because they like the North. And if you were in the South, you did not want to be called a scalawag. Many poor whites became stuck in sharecropping like the African Americans, and some left farming later and went to work in factories. And since they were white, they got the job since a lot of the factory owners were racist and would not hire the African Americans. Northerners, some moved to the South and took advantage of Southern people. These Northerners were called carpetbaggers. They were called this because many carried large bags constructed of what looked like decorative carpet pieces. Looks like luggage. And many were there to actually help the South, but the Southerners did not like that for the most part. They wanted them out, and they called them carpetbaggers, which was another not nice term to call somebody back then. All right, as you're studying, as you're finishing up your studying, make sure that you're looking over your study guide. Make sure you're focusing on the timeline, and make sure you're focusing on the primary source on the back. the Freedmen's Convention picture, as well as the sheet that you're going to be getting, or that you have gotten, that has the boxes where you're trying to put different, I believe it's letters in for each group. And again, if you have a question about what that is, let me know. Good luck studying, and I believe that you can kick this test behind pretty well. I think that if you've been studying, you will do awesome. And yes, this video may be a little bit over 10 minutes, but that's because I'm rambling right now about all the different things you should be studying. All right, have a great day and or night.